All right, so this is episode one of theoretically going to call it, what is it, beer and politics?
Beer and politics?
Beer
Yeah,
and
I'll take
politics. You
that.
think that's a good name?
I'll do it.
I feel it,
Okay,
dude. I wish I had a beer right now, actually.
I have a beer. Shout out to I can't name any brands in case it gets big.
Yeah, but I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll get sponsored by a beer company one day.
Someday.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So, this is episode one. Let's start off by introducing ourselves. Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Go ahead, man.
So, I'm Theork Hero, aka Theo, aka Dumnum. Um, so basically, a little bit of background. I started off as fiscally conservative. I got really, really conservative. I became a hardcore Trump supporter. Um, I went to rallies. I was there January 6th. I just didn't go in the building. So I didn't do anything. I didn't know anything illegal or anything like that. And I turned in the people who did actually. That went down with me. And long story. So basically, I went like a complete 180. I started off like when I was really young. I was kind of liberal, and then my grandfather like didn't quite beat it out of me, but he like thoroughly debated me out of me, and I didn't have the knowledge that I have now. And I didn't have the resources and experience, and I wasn't old enough really to have the arguments prepared to cut basically to he had an argument. He would create a reality where this is exactly what's happening. It's a fallacy, but this is exactly what's happening, and this is what's going on, and liberals are evil, they hate the country, all of this shit. So basically everything you can imagine in regarding to a super conservative person. And he's someone that has warped my reality as an adult. And I love him. He's a great guy. I do think personally, on like a moral perspective, he's generally a good person. It's just him and I politically we don't agree at all. I think politically, it's really shitty the way he thinks and things like that. But it is what it is. He's still a really good guy. I do love him. He's my family. He's my grandfather. He was very nice to me. So, and then I became more liberal and more Democrat, and it took a long time. It was very difficult. I got into Trump slowly, and I got into the really hard, and I fell out of it slowly, and then I fell out of it hard. And now I'm like somewhat moderate conservative. I'm pretty liberal actually, to be honest. Like I'm pretty Democrat. Like if I went to go vote again, I would register Democrat. And I'm more liberal now than I am Democrat. However, there are some things I still believe in small amounts of conservatism. I just don't think that like most like super conservative like people. I don't think they act like good people a lot of the time. I think a lot of them are good people and like deep down. I don't think they intend to do bad things. I just think that a lot of their policies can result in those bad things unintentionally. You're still responsible for the things you do, but intent does matter to me. Um, so that's kind of like where I am. I'm pretty liberal, but I'm decently moderate as well in other cases. It depends on what we're talking about. Depends what's going on. I am very middle of the road in a lot of things, especially regarding to immigration things like that. So what about you?
Jesus, what an intro, man.
Yeah.
Um, okay. I'm Jim or Fobs or whatever you might find me on the internet. Nobody knows that I'm a dog. I grew up actually in a fairly Christian conservative household. Like not
Hmm.
like
Same.
Christianism or Christianity wasn't really pressed on me. Like I
Hmm.
went to church a lot and all that, and I don't necessarily believe all the doctrine and all that, but like my grandma was and my dad was, and my dad tends to be fairly conservative, and I've realized as I'm sure we'll discuss this later, but like the point where you are no longer, so I'm only 30, but like when you are no
Hmm.
longer a child and you have a relationship with your parents
It's way
and
different.
it's a different relationship, and you start to realize your parents aren't omnipotent gods that know everything, and you start to kind of
Yeah, there's people doing their
discuss.
best.
Exactly. And I started to realize my dad started to go farther and farther and farther and farther right.
Same.
And I don't disagree with a lot of conservative ideals, but I think a lot comes to execution.
Hmm.
So if I had to label myself, it's hard because I really like a lot of policies on both sides.
Hmm. I feel that.
I like very much to be kind of socially liberal, but I also like to be kind of economically conservative. And there's politics are so nuanced, and I'm sure we're going to discuss a lot about this in
Hmm.
a lot of detail. But it's not simple ever black or white issues, and I think that's kind of a problem that we have in the country at the moment. Um, and uh, discussing that really kind of breaks that down. So I'm always my biggest thing is I say people will say, "What do you vote for?" And I say whatever idea can sway me the best.
Mhm.
So I'm very open to try to deliberate and discuss and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
where I'm at, somewhere in the middle.
And I'm a big fan of like I'm a big fan of people who are willing to listen and are willing to actually have a discussion and don't feel like personally attacked. Now it's important that like you be careful how you're responding, right? You don't want to attack the person. You may want to attack their idea, but you don't want to attack the person themselves. And like I felt like we've never had that issue, which is really nice, which is why we started this.
Yeah, so a lot of it is like these issues aren't like I said black and white, but like you can have sides or ideas on issues, but coming together to debate them isn't about the person that is presenting it.
Yeah,
Like that person,
yeah, exactly.
it's
It's not about me
even the
convincing
most
you or you convincing me. It's about convincing the audience who are listening to you.
impassioned person about their championing their idea.
Hmm.
They're doing it in the place to better whatever the issue is. It's just a different path to get there.
Got you.
And very much like we had discussed earlier before this, I don't think a lot of people in this country would disagree with the idea that we want a better America. It's the debate of how we do it is what burdens us down.
And what's interesting? Jury had the exact same point, as a matter of fact, because they were like, I don't think that like they necessarily want to ruin America. They just want to. They want to. Everyone wants to make America better. It's just how we go about it is just way different. And so
Sure.
like, there is common ground in that. But like the bottom line is we'll get into this in probably more episodes later and stuff like that. But the bottom line is it feels, at least to me, that some groups are much more easily hostile towards individuals just for being who they are than the other. I would say that's a fair statement to make. Um,
Yeah,
and
so
obviously not most people, right? Like, I would hope most people, don't hate people for just being who they are, but a lot do.
I would take that further and say most people are somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
if you go in the general public, like just as a background, so I have a psychology degree.
Hmm.
I have studied a lot on humans and social psychology and human condition and groups. I think you would find most people belong to a moderate understanding. And that's like there's an average bell curve in
Hmm.
everything for a reason because most people
Are
subscribe
just
to that
average. Most
idea.
people are
Right.
average intelligence. Most people
Well, not
are
just intelligence, but like their average
sentiment.
understanding and
Yeah.
sentiment and disposition. And so when you get these groups on both the left and the right politically, and they just scream, we are in a we are in a ability in a modern media sense to amplify those.
Hmm.
So you have people on both sides that are very loud, but they don't represent most people. And it's these extremes that seem to fight back and forth, and people are pulled in either direction because they feel like, well, the left has a lot of good points. I don't necessarily agree with them completely, but it's better than those guys on the right. Like, so
Yeah.
they shift, and I feel like most people don't have this extremist ideal.
And I would go so far as to say that, unfortunately, at least from what I've seen, the people that get elected tend to be the most extreme. I don't know that many
So,
moderate people in
so here's the
politics.
here's the thing, right? Like, the loudest people are the people that get elected.
Hmm.
So we'll just take Trump for example, because
Yep.
he's the
Yep.
most recent president before Biden, who was very outspoken. He was on a scale of 1 to 10, one being most liberal, 10 to most conservative. I would say he politicized himself as like a 7. He wasn't in the middle. He was definitely Republican, but he was not like QAnon, right?
Not initially.
No. But two things kind of happened. One, as you sell yourself to politics,
Hmm.
you try to gather up all the little groups that might be on the fringes, right? So when you are campaigning as a Republican, you need to try to say certain things that really hit with people that are concerned with the border, people that are concerned with tax policy, people that are concerned with immigration or whatever. Like you have to hit different constituent
Hmm.
groups. So you sound very radical in certain senses.
Yeah.
Like your opponents, the left isn't going to give a shit about what you do because they're not going to vote for you no matter what.
Yep.
But you, especially in this country now, you are you are polling for people somewhere in the middle. You are trying to capture as many of those
Yeah, because the
on
middle
the
is
fence
probably the largest
voters.
demographic that like you have. Because think of it like this, right? Most like think about extremes. If you were an extreme individual, extreme Democrat or extreme Republican, the odds of you voting for anyone on the other side is like fucking zero. And so
I
in a
agree.
presidential election, which is the one pretty much the one we're talking about for the most part, like local elections, stuff like that are a lot more complicated. But even I'm not saying like presidential things aren't complicated. There's a reason they do it the way they do it. But I would say most of the time in a presidential situation, you have essentially two candidates, two party system. I love it. I hate it. You know what I mean?
Keep talking. I'll
And
be right back.
you have individuals who are, let's just say, less likely to vote for the other side, right? So someone who is extreme, right? Someone who is extreme Republican or Democrat is not going to vote for a
For the other
Republican
side.
president.
Yeah.
Someone who's a Democrat voter will never vote for a Republican president 90% of the time, unless for some
So
reason unless they're saying all of the fucking Democratic talking points, which they never will because they never get a nomination, right? They just it's not going to happen. Vice versa is probably true. Um,
can I want to take a pause and just say, in case this ever blows up
yeah,
and we become on the internet because we're recording this, um, we're not political experts. We talk a lot about our heart, and if this gets a following or whatever, like we will absolutely. I know and I'm
yeah,
sure Theo will do our research about these topics.
yeah. I mean, future
And we're just
episodes, I
kind of
plan if we do this, make it like a consistent thing. I plan on
sure,
having like a little rubric of stuff we want to go over.
sure. But
You know, and
I want it to be
you know,
informed. I don't
yeah,
want it to be kind of talking
informed,
out our
you know.
ass
And
kind
I'm
of
all
thing.
about. Here's the problem, right? I became a Trumper because I had an open mind, which is
That's an interesting
I
thought to say,
know,
but
I
I would
know,
agree.
you
Yeah,
know, but it's how I got to it, right?
sure.
And the thing is the pool that this is why they go to swing states. They want the middle. They want the
They
moderates.
do.
They
Yeah,
want the people
you're
who,
absolutely right.
because for example, they never fucking campaign in Tennessee. They don't fucking do that shit. They go there once in a blue moon, maybe like when they're already in their not campaigning, but
When
like
they're in the
when
region,
they're in their region,
just
right? They might
make a
do it.
stop.
But they don't
Make a
never
stop
say,
in
you know what I'm gonna fucking
Tallahassee.
do? I'm gonna go out to bumfuck nowhere, Tennessee. I'm gonna go out to bumfuck nowhere, Tennessee, and make a presentation. Everyone
Well,
there
that's
is
the
gonna be
thing.
fucking Republican. You're not gonna
You're
change anyone.
from you're from Tennessee. You're
Yep.
kind of semi-rural Tennessee.
Yep.
I'm suburban Ohio, but I live very close to a lot of rural. Like
Yep.
you don't have to campaign in those areas because you already have the vote. Everyone around me in all I would say 95% of the people around where I'm at have Trump signs in their lawn. And
I think I
whatever.
think if there was a sign in my area, 90% chance is Trump. Not every yard
Yeah,
has a sign.
yeah,
Like I would say probably maybe 10 to 15% of yards have a sign, but
I
they're
would
almost
agree.
always Trump signs.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like they already know what they're getting when they vote these kind of. And I mean, like statistically speaking, cities tend to be more liberal, and
Mm.
rural areas tend to be more conservative. So if you're voting in these regions that are either of those, you don't necessarily have to campaign in those regions
Yeah.
because you already have the votes.
Yeah, you know exactly. Like, if you know, for example, I don't know the actual statistic, right? I don't know the exact year the last time a Democrat ran in Tennessee. I can tell you, it ain't fucking recent memory. I'll tell you that. Um, I mean, God, it's not like Hillary won fucking Tennessee, right? It's not like fucking Obama won Tennessee. Like Tennessee is the most lockdown fucking vote you could possibly have. It's one of the most conservative states in the fucking country.
So it's
Like
interesting that you say that because in the last election, some of those assumed states actually swapped,
I
and what
know,
that's
which is
so
like,
you look at like
yeah,
Wisconsin, you look at Nevada,
mhm,
states that not necessarily have been on the high radar of
yeah,
political campaigning have won
Wasn't Michigan
those
close too?
votes.
Michigan
I Yeah, one of
for
those
fucking Trump?
northwestern
Wasn't that close?
states, they were close.
Like, well, who
Um,
the fuck would ever think Michigan would be fucking even
it's this
remotely?
weird political climate that has kind of changed, and
Yeah.
I want to propose an idea a little bit later
Uh huh.
of why it is what it is.
Okay.
But
I'm interested.
this kind of like swap of states that necessarily have been kind of middle ground have
Yeah.
really kind of shifted into what they are deeming to be more swing states have not become swing states, and lockdown states have become swing states. And it's kind of this. Part of it is how the political climate plays out, and
Yep.
part of it is how the electoral votes play out.
This kind of goes into something that we talked about even before we started the podcast. Essentially, when it comes down to is more people voting, and the younger people are, typically the more Democrat they are, right? The more the more liberal they
Yeah.
are, at
So
least
I
leaning towards it. Now, I'm not saying every single young person's a fucking raging liberal, right? That's clearly not the
no
case.
no.
However,
Well, studies have shown,
mhm,
and I would love to go back and find the statistics and the study
yeah, go
on
ahead.
this,
You can research while I make my next point if you want.
but several studies had shown that people, say 30 years ago,
Hmm.
were X amount of liberal or conservative
Yeah,
leaning. In 30 years later, people 30 are actually more points leaning towards the liberal side than they are conservative. So the general populace has shifted more towards a liberal leaning in general than a conservative side. So you're seeing more people are voting liberal or have more liberal ideas than the last generation.
yeah, and
Which
and arguably it's a good thing, but it really depends on what side you're on in the fence, right?
I mean, I don't ever want to make any good or bad. Like I'm not vilifying any
Yeah,
side.
I'm not like, for example, I'll never say something crazy like, "Oh, Republicans are racist" or something like that, because like the
Sure.
reality is some people may act racist a little bit at a time and not mean to, and not realize what they're doing. Because I've done that before. I've done it myself. I've done it a
Well,
lot.
that's a completely
Yeah,
different debate
but
about the idea. But
like,
like I don't think this podcast here is to make assumptions about what is good or bad.
yeah,
I think it's to
I try
present.
not to. I just have my opinion on what I think
Sure. Sure. I would
people,
agree. My as
what I think
well.
a reasonable person should do. And I feel like, like if someone became political, I feel like getting more information is almost never a bad thing.
Yeah.
And as long as the information is accurate, that's a big thing. It has to be accurate.
So so that's kind of a sticking point that I
Hmm.
have a problem with. So I don't really follow a lot of political dealings,
Hmm.
but I have found that if you look at major media sources, and we'll
Uh huh.
talk about like MSNBC or CNN and Fox and Guardian, and you have all these major media outlets. They are so skewed to one side that they will only report their side's argument.
Exactly. And
And then,
yeah,
even if you have we'll call them a neutral station, say like NPR. NPR tends to try to be slightly liberal,
hmm,
but fairly moderate.
they have liberal ideals, but they have like people with other opinions on there.
But the problem with NPR isn't that they have a political side, it's that they omit information.
Oh, really?
They just won't present it.
Yeah.
And so the problem with getting good detailed facts about whatever is happening,
Hmm.
so Trump and Kamala had a debate. If you
Oh yeah.
want the actual facts about what happened, you have to read 4, 5, 6 media sources in order to get the full story without any bias. Like you literally have to do your due diligence to pull pieces of information from
You know
each
what I would
in
love to
order
do
to try to
with you
do.
is, have you
Yeah,
seen the Trump Kamala debate?
I did not watch it. No,
Yeah, neither have I. You know what would be really cool is if we actually went over the debate, watched it
and
together,
did a
and then
commentary.
did a commentary and then fact checked.
So that's the interesting thing. I guess this was a serious issue about Trump's previous
Hmm.
running and his campaigning the the debate before Kamala took over the
Mhm.
Democratic ticket, the stations didn't really care about fact checking. When Kamala took over, not saying that has anything to do with her, but when Kamala took over and Trump and Kamala went head to head, they actually had a council to fact check on the spot about what they were saying.
Mainly because Trump in the previous debates kind of went off left field a little bit.
I mean, say what you like about each, but
Yeah,
Trump was a major. So
yeah,
it's funny because like I live in Ohio, and they had discussed about this woman, this immigrant eating cats in Canton. Like I live close to there, and we're like, what?
yeah.
What are you fucking talking about?
Yeah, don't get me wrong.
So
Like, okay, I think Trump is really funny. I just don't think he's very smart. Which is one of the things. Like, I used to not think about his intelligence at all or anything like that back when I was a Trump supporter. In fact, like, I often made excuses for it, like rationality, because I love playing devil's advocate. I do, I really do. And
I think Trump is smarter than you're giving him credit for.
maybe, I look. I think he's very good. I think he's almost like an idiot savant in some things. He's really fucking good at demagoguery. He's really good at riling
Okay,
people up.
I will give you that. So
And he's
if we're
been
gonna
playing the
get
media like fucking flutes for like how many years now? Like, like
so
fucking back in his TV days, right? He was all about. He knew how to
right.
gain
No, you're
attention.
right. You're right. He was very much a look at me. This is how I'm going to do things.
Yeah.
Which is what gets me to, I assume, is going to be the main point of today's episode.
Uh huh.
How is Donald Trump like Hitler?
Oh God, that is a fucking
Right?
clickbait. That is
Right?
clickbait right there.
Right? That is the clickbait, right? Okay, so let me preface this, right?
Okay, go ahead. I'm gonna let you roll.
Um, at no point am I saying is Donald Trump anything actually like Adolf Hitler in
Uh
his
huh.
policies or no, that's such a
You're not saying
clickbaity
he's
kind of
like gonna
thing.
slaughter, but you're not saying he's like gonna slaughter a
No.
bunch of Jews or something like that.
What
Okay.
I am interested in is how Trump uses demagoguery much like Hitler did in
Hmm.
his rise to power in so here's what you have to remember. Hitler was elected as chancellor
Oh yeah.
to power, and that is where I would say we hardline cut them apart. Like Trump is not trying to take over the nation. Whatever you might say about January 6th, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trump is not trying to undercut and take over the nation like Hitler did in 1939. But if you look at their rise to power in the situation that they were in,
Very similar.
it is that's yes, it is very similar. So Hitler fought in World War One. He understood the loss of his country
Hmm.
during the Treaty of Versailles. He understood how damning the Allies were in World War One. He had a very strong. It was a twofold front, right? Like so, he had a very strong nationalist idea,
Hmm.
like a very kind of like it's funny because like I could propose quotes and not tell you who they're from and just change the language slightly to
Yeah,
make it
and
sense,
like
and you
people do that all the
wouldn't know
time.
who it
It's a
is.
bit. It's a bit of like what
So
is it? God
if
knows
I
all
said
things.
we need to make America first or we need to make Germany first, both of them had the same ideals.
Hmm.
So Hitler was very angry at the fact that Germany had been punished so hard for the Treaty of Versailles. And he used that to build a constituency to basically eventually elect him into office. I would I would wager to say Trump did the same thing that so many people in when did he get elected? 2020? 2020 you look
2016.
at the was it 2016? Oh
Hmm.
my
He got
god.
elected 2016.
So 2008 we had a major housing
Yeah.
crisis. We had a downturn in our economy. We had a huge uprise in a Chinese manufacturing where people were losing jobs.
Plus,
We had
COVID.
Obama in his second term,
Hmm.
ending the second term. We had two wars in the Middle East still ongoing. Trump
Didn't.
ran
Yeah.
on several policies, one being I can't be bought like a regular politician,
Hmm.
hashtag drain the swamp. That was the whole thing. That was like
That's what got me
I'm
initially into him.
not a politician. I'm not I'm not like those people that you had voted for before who let you down. That was a huge selling point. Number two, that he said he would be against a lot of quote unquote what he thought was the problem with America's border, like especially the southern border with Mexico. I mean, you can literally look up and say they were sending their worst. They were sending rapists and whatever. Like he was very staunchly against illegal immigration.
Hmm.
Okay? So he had a strong border policy. He had a strong America First policy based on the idea that companies or foreign nations were undercutting American companies, and he wanted to bring that back to America. So he had a very strong economic plan. He had a very strong border plan, and just looking at Trump, that's a strong platform. But coupled with the fact that um, Hillary Clinton, I think, who's running against,
Hmm.
didn't have a super strong platform to run on, he ended up winning, right?
Yeah.
So you look at a modern day where a lot of his rhetoric wasn't against policy, it was against opponents. So if you look at Trump rallies early on, a lot of them were, why don't we look at Hillary's emails? Why don't we look at, whatever? And he continued this once he runs into Biden. Why don't we look at Biden's competency? Why don't we look at Biden's son's laptop? Why don't we look at so a lot of what he ran on was against his opponent, not against his opponent's policies. And personally, right now, what I see is the greatest counterpoint to
Uh-huh.
Trump and the Republicans was that Kamala is running. It literally takes the wind out of Trump's sails.
Hmm.
Like the greatest, the why Trump loved Biden so much is because he's easy to run against.
Oh yeah.
So I
I can't
didn't,
believe he
I
won,
didn't, I
to
did
be
not
honest.
look, I didn't look at a lot of the debate between
Hmm.
Trump and Kamala, but the things that I have read was that he was very disheveled because he didn't know how to debate policy versus debate the person.
Hmm.
And so you look at Trump in the primary selection when they were deciding who was going to take the primary candidacy vote.
Yeah.
He is attacking each of the candidates because his whole platform runs on demagoguery where he can manipulate the crowd to vote for him rather than the other guy. Not what he believes in or what he's going to do, but because what if he is and what they are not. So at the end of the day, that is the point I'm trying to make. And I'm going to throw this back to you, Theo. But the point I'm making is Trump is like Hitler because he uses demagoguery to gather a power base rather than actually solve issues. He attacks people and opponents rather than actual issues.
Hmm. And I don't think that is I mean, I don't think that's incorrect at all, man. And so I mean, so the main topic for this episode, do you want so it's going to be like how Trump is related to Hitler, right? Like not related, but like how similar. And so
Sure.
I guess I could really go into like how I became like a Trumper, right? I think I have a
Okay.
very unique story because not many people can say they were in fucking DC right on January 6th, let alone went
Sure.
there as a Trump supporter, let alone went down
Sure.
there with people who literally are fucking in federal prison right now for breaking into the Capitol and assaulting
And
people, beating the
and
shit out of people.
what's even better is that you are not that anymore based
Correct.
on
You
kind
know,
of recent events.
yeah, recent
So,
recent events, recent discussions we've had outside of stream and things
sure.
like that. It's like just give you an idea where I'm at now, right? I'm all about, for my border policy, what I would do is something like, if you want a border to prevent drugs, right, you either got to do two things. One, you have to make drugs legal, take the power out of the cartels. Kind of hard to do. Pretty much a hard sell. Not really very doable. I don't ever see that happening in current political climate. at fucking all. Decriminalizing drugs, I don't see it happening. Two, either decriminalize or you tighten border. You make it so the drugs can't very easily get in. You improve the border resources, things like that. More importantly, is you have to make the process for coming in legal, legally, much safer and more convenient than just sneaking in. You know, and like I actually listened to,
Okay,
yeah,
so I would like to raise a point about that
uh huh,
because what you just said is very atypical of what people would traditionally say.
hmm,
You say make it easier and more convenient, and most people, in a conservative sense, would say make it harder
yeah, they don't want people in.
or stringent.
They don't want people in,
Which
and
so like to just throw the middle ground argument in. I don't I can't say for everyone, but I would say most people would say immigrants are okay to come to this country if they do it legally.
I think
I
that's
don't
very fair to say,
I don't think that
and
that's crazy to say, right?
and great because here's the thing, right? I can't tell you how many Trumpers I've talked to that I've said the words, "It's okay to come here, just do it the right fucking way." Who are like, "You're right, you're completely right." They agreed with me,
Exactly.
and they're
Exactly.
Trumpers, right? Like
I
now,
I
granted, I will say this,
I
between
don't I
but
don't think that Trumpers are against immigration. I think Trumpers are against illegal
they're
immigration.
very against illegal immigration. But I think a lot of them don't necessarily like because here's the thing. When I said this, Trumpers were like the Trump administration, like and people that followed Trump and like a Trumpers, right? They
Yeah.
weren't as extreme. They
Are
had
you saying this is like
QAnon when
twenty
yeah.
sixteen?
Yeah, this was like 2027. This is before QAnon.
Okay.
This is before people thinking literally JFK is going to come back to the fucking from the dead and fucking, like fucking get
Okay.
elected, right?
Okay.
This is before like fucking some really fringe shit happened. And so a lot of people were like that. Now, would that be still be the case? I don't know. However, here's what I think should happen. It should be like because apparently I listened to a documentary while I was playing games, and it talked about how apparently we are turning away literally millions of people who aren't qualified for asylum.
Okay.
And the thing is I have the utmost empathy for people who come here. I really do. Because it is fucking scary. I can't imagine living in the situation they lived in, somehow gathering the resources needed to get my ass, my physical body, to fucking cross thousands of miles without a car, without like any resources whatsoever. How the fuck do they do that? I have no idea. They fucking walked apparently half the time,
Oh yeah.
right? It's scary. Like, like women get assaulted, like young girls get assaulted, like they get kidnapped, they get ransomed, all kinds of bad shit happens to these people trying to move in like caravans for safety, or like herd animals, right? Like I'm not saying they're animals, of course, they're people, but it kind of like how like in a herd where they run and they move and they travel in groups. And I can't imagine doing that. I have the utmost empathy for them. However, America cannot solve the world's problems. We can't do it. We can't be
That
responsible for taking in every single person in the world who's in a bad
that gets
situation.
to a another debate about since World War II and the forming of the UN,
Hmm.
how America has kind of been the police
The
force.
police force
No,
of the world.
we will discuss that in
That's
another
that is a whole other
episode.
topic. We will
That's
get into
another
that.
episode.
Maybe that's episode 2. But
But to your point, like the idea that I don't know. To me, when I
uh-huh.
see things about immigration, it's always like all of these people are sneaking across the border and they're stealing your jobs, and it's like
Most of it's
nobody
bullshit. Most of it's legit
nobody's really
bullshit.
doing that.
Yeah.
Nobody's really doing that.
Yeah.
These people are in terrible situations that want to improve themselves. And
They
the
come
the
here for
greatest
economic opportunity. And
the
most of the time,
greatest
like here's the thing. Here's the crazy situation. Imagine being in a situation where traveling thousands of miles away from your family, living in a fucking room with 15 other dudes, all paying a small amount towards rent, and sending 80% of your check away is a good idea. And it,
that
and it
sounds like
makes and
Detroit.
it makes enough of a difference for your family to survive back home. Imagine living in that situation. And that's the good situation. That is the ideal situation. That is
And
crazy to me.
and
To
here's the thing
me,
that
like,
blows my mind that I'm going to make a lot of stereotypes, and I
mhm,
don't believe they're necessarily always true in this conversation.
mhm,
A lot of people on the right are white. They are white, middle
I think that's fair.
class, or lower middle
Yep.
class people.
Middle class, I think, is very strong. Most of them,
They
construction workers, own businesses,
sure,
blue
yeah, sure.
collar, things like that. I think that's
They're
very
they're
fair.
blue collar workers on the right, right?
Yep.
They forget where their family came from.
They,
Within
you
the
know, yeah,
last 100 years, their family were the people that were not
welcome.
welcomed here.
Yeah.
They
Yep.
were Irish, they were German, they were
Jewish. They were,
Italian,
they
they
were
were
everything.
Jewish.
You know.
They are the same people within the last, I'll say, 2 generations that were not welcomed in this country because they were coming over to take true American, and by true American, I mean Dutch and English, true American jobs. Those
Hmm.
goddamn Irish, those goddamn Italians, those goddamn Germans are coming over and taking all of our jobs. And it sounds very familiar now that Mexicans and Venezuelans and anyone from Middle or South America are
Yeah.
coming over to try to better their life. Now that they're here, it's a problem.
Yeah.
But when their family came over, they were pioneers.
But here's the thing.
And that's what kind of pisses me
Yeah.
off.
Here's the thing too, though, is for people who are like, imagine you have a border situation where you have a very restricted border in the sense of, if you fucking show up anywhere else in the border, you're in deep shit. When you show up here, we're pretty much gonna process you in an efficient and timely manner.
Okay.
What would you choose?
I mean, I would definitely choose if I was legitimately trying to get into a country, I would absolutely choose the chance to try to get in efficiently. Not even efficiently, but like
Safely.
a chance, yeah, safely,
Yeah.
safely.
And by the way, to give you an idea how extreme I was, I used to believe this 100%. I used to think if you were caught crossing the border illegally, even if you had children, you would get shot. And you should be
Wow.
shot. That's what I believed. I
Okay.
thought that like a river of blood or an ocean of blood was necessary to prevent the invasion of the illegals.
Where
Reality
are you at
situation
now?
is most people aren't like that. Now for example, I think like cartel members, extremely dangerous individuals who have been caught like 5 fucking times and everything like that. Like technically, is it cheaper to use 25 cents on a bullet or whatever? Technically, yes. Is it right? Probably not. People like that.
Uh,
If you
so we're so we're getting into the cost of morality, is what you're
Yeah,
saying?
basically, kind of.
Yeah.
But and that's man, that is a messy subject, bud. It is a messy
Sure.
subject. I don't envy anyone.
Sure.
And I mean, the problem comes back to like legalization of drugs would basically eliminate half the problem.
You think
But
so?
I think it would actually. We can go into that in a second. But
Okay.
for me, the biggest thing is you have to make it. So the problem is border security and border resources are very low. They don't have enough
Sure.
resources to process the amount of applications they get, and so it takes fucking forever. So what do? They send police people in, and most of the time they make it to their meeting, by the way. And then when they don't, it's usually because they don't have a fucking ride or they missed a notice, something like that. Turns out,
Sure.
most of the time they're just good people and they attend the fucking meetings, and they get turned away
Sure.
at the border a lot of the time too. Where it's like, I'm sorry,
Sure.
your qualifications do not meet what you need to be able to be an asylum have an asylum here. I'm sorry.
Here, the crazy thing about American immigration is that it is not unique to America. Quite a few European nations that are much smaller populace, and I'll say like
Hmm.
Scandinavian nations, England, um, they have very strict immigration policies. Like, and say what you want about people, but they are only looking for certain kinds of people, and they have a not necessarily a quota, but they have a list of we need X amount of doctors, we need X amount of engineers, we need X amount of
Basically,
laborers,
if
we
you
need
come
X
here with a
amount.
skill and you want asylum, it doesn't matter how good your asylum claim is. You'll just be let in. Essentially, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so if you fit a niche that the country needs, they were
I think that's
more
very accurate, actually.
likely to want you in the country. And that's not just about America. That's about a lot
A lot of
of,
countries, Canada
I would
too.
say,
Canada
first
won't
world
take Americans
nations.
unless you're skilled.
That's what I'm saying. It's a lot of first world nations that are high on their population cap, that are very cautious about who they let over their borders permanently.
Absolutely.
So, so my company has a company in Canada, And in order to just go there to work, you need very strict border paperwork. You need a letter from your company telling you why you're there, how long you're going to be there. I'm not looking to immigrate. I'm just looking to go and work there and come back. And
Yeah,
that's at the northern border. Like people don't talk about the Canadian American border. We talk about the American Mexican border.
because
Like,
basically, it's basically the Mexico-American border is basically the gateway to all of South America. Basically,
well,
you
that's
know,
yeah, right.
everyone who comes from South America
So
comes through that border.
there is a high level of border politics because we feel threatened that whatever the statistical number that people or the media claim are coming over to take over American jobs, and I'm sure you've heard of everything, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there are people all across the world. Like it, the number one reason that people get into this country are not physically crossing the southern border; it's by plane. They
Mhm.
have a visa to come here, and then they just don't leave.
Yeah, I mean
Like,
that's pretty much that's the main source of illegal immigration. Actually, is just visa overstays. But even that, a significant percentage of it isn't intentional. Just happens.
no, not necessarily. It's unintentional.
Yeah.
But like that's my problem with the media is that they want to sell you on the idea that millions of people are rampaging over our border to ruin our way of life. Like that's it's just not true. Like it's not true. Like
Yeah,
yes,
and
there are people that come over here and
I mean, how
they
many Americans
don't
do you know
want
want to work in construction? I'm not saying that to be racist or anything like that. I apologize if that somehow it comes
well,
out like that. But I mean,
that's a whole different debate about trades
it's
versus stuff
it's the
like
stuff they're
that.
doing tends to be jobs we don't want to do anyway, and they're seasonal. A lot of them are seasonal, and then sometimes the seasonal workers overstay their visas, things like that.
My
But
my brother-in-law works in agriculture
mhm.
in the American Southwest, and I would guarantee you a vast majority of them are seasonal immigrant workers
Mhm. And there's
because
nothing
they
wrong
want
with
to
being a
come
seasonal
over
immigrant worker,
here.
by the
They
way.
want
There's
to come
nothing
over
wrong with
here.
that.
They want to work, earn money, and send it back because there are better opportunities here. And like at the end of the day, that's what America was founded
Yeah.
on, a land of better
And
opportunities.
here's the thing, and the fact is, I feel it is un-American to say, you know what? Because even though we came here for opportunity, you shouldn't be allowed to do the same.
Exactly. It's hypocritical
It
to
is
say
hypocritical, actually.
we made it, so we're done. Like that's
You know,
beside the point.
it's basically another episode, basically, because it's like the boomers pulling the ladder back up behind them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And it's
yeah.
just it's
No.
the same
Oh,
kind of
we'll
fucking
have a whole
mentality.
episode about that.
Oh yeah, ladder up behind you. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I got mine. Fuck you, basically. And
Yeah,
it's bullshit. It's bullshit.
it is
And
bullshit.
so for me, the big thing about like the border, right? If you make it so, and again, our next topic, and then probably this episode is going to be like the legalization of drugs, right? But if you make it so that they have all the resources they need, they have like 100 fucking people on staff at any one time to take applications. It's like 100 lines instead of like four, right? Whatever the number is, right? I mean, there
Sure.
are people smarter than me in government that'll be able to figure the exact idea out, right? The exact semantics. But the idea, if you give them more than enough resources to take the amount of people they need to do in a reasonable amount of time, more and more people will just go through the fucking thing and go through the process. Now, here's the thing, though, is I don't think people immigrating is necessarily a bad thing. And here's what I kind of had an idea while you were talking. What if, like, the U.S. and most in other first world countries who say, okay, so we have all these problems that we may have instigated over the course of the past couple hundred years due to economic decisions we've made, and shit that has out of control too. It's not all our fault, but like some of it probably is realistically. Like Britain was a fucking massive empire. Chances you think they didn't pump and dump some fucking countries? Probably they probably did
Oh yeah.
realistically.
Oh yeah.
And they aren't the only ones. Fucking France probably did that too. Spain probably did that too. Everything like
Yep.
that. And so like a lot of European countries are taking ownership of that, and it's like we'll let immigrants stay here because they need a place to stay. We want to let them be safe. And we'll actually have probably a whole episode on the UK situation too with immigration. But
We'll discuss about how they exploited immigrants, but okay, go ahead.
yeah. So
We
I feel
want you
like
to be safe. Just kidding. We're here to
yeah.
exploit you. Whatever.
No, but like what I feel like, and imagine a world where Russia isn't an asshole, right, and will cooperate in this situation. Imagine you
Okay.
have all of this unutilized land, right?
Okay.
These small ass towns all across America, which is just completely fucking empty, completely fucking empty. All these resources that you going untapped. Now, I'm not saying we gotta fucking ruin the environment, right? I'm not saying in a way that ruins the environment. I am saying you have people who need opportunity. We have places that need people. There are places in fucking what is it? God, is it North Dakota? I want to say there are towns that will literally pay you a stipend to fucking move there.
Yeah. No, there are quite a few. I would say so. I'm Midwest, but like very Midwest states
Yeah.
who are so desperate for people because they can't maintain their population. Alaska was like that for a while, but they have
Hmm.
since picked that up.
Yeah,
But there
because
are
the
still
financial incentive
I'm
actually really
like
incentivized people to move there. They're poor.
the Dakotas, Montana, Idaho, all those flyover states no one
Exactly,
ever
flyover
thinks
states.
about.
Ohio
That
too,
they
probably, right? Did you say Ohio?
Ohio's pretty Ohio's weird because so I've been to a lot of states, but like a lot of it is like a bunch of places are concentrated. So like
Mm,
Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, Dayton are concentrated, and then you go 25 minutes out of one of those cities, and it's the middle of the fucking farmland. Like it looks like you get in a plane and you start flying, and it's just clear cut squares of farmland. And you
yeah.
get to I'm sure this is a lot in the flyover states, and
Hmm.
that's such a derogatory term for them.
I mean,
But like
it's not. I don't think of it. I don't think of it as derogatory. Well, I mean, maybe if you live there, you would feel that way, I guess. But
that's
I
what
don't
I
live there,
mean.
so maybe that's why.
But
But
fuck Montana, right?
yeah,
But like
you ain't
you
no
get a lot
Hannah.
of those you get a lot of those states that are like nobody ever thinks about because they're not East Coast politics. They're
Hmm.
not, I'll say, like colonial antiquity.
Yeah.
So like you're like Virginia, like it's very colonial, and you don't think about them because they're not swing states or they're not West Coast states.
Hmm.
So you don't like California's huge and Washington's huge, Arizona's big, but you start to get in the middle of the country and you're like, oh yeah, Utah is a state? Yeah, right. Montana's a state?
Yeah, you
We
forget
have a
about it.
North and South Dakota? Right, like so like nobody, I'm not gonna say nobody lives there, but like the populace is farther distributed in those
Much
states
farther distributed. In
than
fact,
in
a
the
few of
east or
those
west
cities have
coast.
most of the people.
Yeah, yeah, I would
Majority,
say so.
vast majority of the people, actually.
I don't know the statistics, but I would very much wager the
Yeah.
vast majority of people in Montana live in Billings.
Yeah, and you want to know what's something crazy? You want to know the strongest criticism I have of the Electoral College? Because all the
Oh,
people live in
okay.
that city. That city is blue, yet the state is red.
Yes,
Hmm.
but also no.
Yeah, we'll go into Electoral College, of course. But so my idea was, imagine we lived in a world where everyone would stop being dicks for it. Of course, impossible to happen, but imagine we're using our imagination
Hmm.
here. So imagine we lived in a world where Canada, the U.S., Europe, maybe Russia, places like that found areas in their country that needed people there to stimulate the economy, that needed people there to mine the resources, not necessarily like mine, but like utilize the resources there to grow
Sure.
food, to to work at factories, to do
Maintain.
whatever,
Yeah.
to be a part of industry. Hopefully, an industry that isn't like environmentally bad. I don't want to fucking. I'm not saying go fucking drill the fucking. I'm not saying go fracking
Sometimes
all
you
over the
don't have a
fucking place.
choice.
Sometimes you have a choice. We do live in the world we live in. But hopefully, like imagine they banded together and say, these areas need people, right? And then you go to a border place, and it's like, okay, you arrive at the border. These are your options. You can go here, you can go here, you can go here. These are the benefits of each of these. Which one do you want? And then they go sent to this fucking place where they have resources there to help them. Say, hey, you know what? Like, we got this taken care of for you, and things like that. And speaking of, like, I know the word indentured servitude, I feel like it has a lot of baggage with it, and I feel like the idea originally was bad. However, I don't have a problem with someone saying, deciding to work for a company, and say, you know what, this company is going to treat you well, this company is going to pay you well, they're required to pay you well, and they're going to pay as part of getting you over to where you need to be. They will pay for your immigration, your relocation, basically like relocation contracts. I don't have
Yeah.
a problem with that. I think that'd be a really great thing, especially if there was an incentives for them to develop in these areas which are underutilized, where no one lives. Now, granted, you have an argument where it's like, oh, I live in my small town of 200 people, and now it's full of immigrants. Well, guess what? They're people, dude. They gotta go fucking somewhere.
That so
You know?
just right off the bat, like that's a very big difference from indentured servitude.
Yeah. Well,
But
yeah. I
so
don't
you
consider
look
it
at
indentured servitude, but like consensual servitude is basically glorified slavery, so it's bad.
Yeah,
But
it is.
like having an economic agreement between two people
So
fairly.
that that's kind of the issue with modern American corporations.
Yeah,
Like,
they're not fair.
and I'm
They
not
will
saying this is
exploit.
the case. This is not the case for every corporation or situation, but in we'll say the 1940s, you know what the difference between the average worker and the CEO made?
God, it had to be like 10 times. Now it's like what, 200, some crazy shit like that.
7 times. The
Seven
CEO
times.
would make 7 times the average worker.
Yeah, which is still a lot.
Now is over 320 on average. The
Yeah,
CEO will make over the average worker.
yeah,
And the sad
and that's
part
just a
wasn't
salary.
that well so that's my point, that the sad part wasn't that it was just the salary. Corporations in the 40s and 50s were understanding of the idea that they were implemented in a place to raise up the community. A corporation will say GM or General Electric or whatever your corporation is, was there to provide jobs for the community. Those community workers could then earn a wage to spend on the economy, which
Hmm.
would then bolster the economy.
Yep.
So you should be able to the general idea in almost every circumstance was that you should be able to afford the product that you are producing as a worker. And in that, we have shifted from the 60s and 70s, and we started heavily marketing to and this is another topic, but I'm not blaming women, but I'm blaming women. But the truly the role of dinks families, dual income, no kids, or women entering the workforce and having more people in the workforce
Hmm.
has affected the workforce in a way that it requires a higher per capita wage to sustain a family.
Yeah.
So what a man so my favorite example is you look at The Simpsons. Homer
Yeah.
Simpson did not
Minimum,
he didn't
like low
have
skill job, paid for a
well
house, two kids.
he had a high school diploma. He never
Yep.
went to college.
Yep.
He worked in a trade. He had a family of 5 and bought a house and survived in the I guess at the time would be the late 80s. That was the ideal American modern family. And if you look at it now, that is in no way possible.
Uh-huh.
Like, I live in a very low cost of living state. I only work and I have a good job,
Yeah.
but like my wife doesn't work and we can, I'm not saying barely make our bills, but like we don't have a lot extra at the end of paying all of our bills. Whereas if you look at it in my situation, and I don't know because I haven't looked at the statistics, but it was portrayed that a one person could make a livable wage. I would say a moderate middle class to upper middle class wage with minimal education, but had experience,
Hmm.
but minimal education and could provide for a family of 4 or 5 without thinking about much.
Yeah, and that was the standard. That was supposed to be still be a thing. It's not.
Right. It's
And if
not. It's
and
not.
if he thinks it is, you're fucking deluding yourself. Because guess what? If you could support a family of 5, I'm sorry, but you are not lower class. You are very middle class, upper
Yeah.
middle class, probably.
And
Um,
like, so my wife and I don't have any kids, but like, with just my wage, it would be difficult for us to support more than one kid.
yeah, I mean, and
Um,
that's crazy because you told me you make a good money. You make good
I
money.
mean, I'll just say it. I make $80,000 a year,
That's pretty
just
good,
myself.
all things
So like,
considered.
that's not bad,
Yeah,
but like, it's just 2 of us and
you
our
know,
pets. But like, I feel like I could support one child. Past that, I would be a
very
little bit
maybe. You
concerned.
know.
I would be very concerned about supporting more than one child on 80,000 a year. So, and we're getting into a different topic about different things, but going back to immigration, it's these people were, I mean, discussing even outside the promises of America.
Hmm.
These people realize, like, if you've never been to Mexico or Venezuela or any of those kind of
I've
middle
never set
American
foot on
countries,
Mexico. I have been in Mexican waters though.
you don't realize how bad their situation is. And what really gets me is that the same situations and the same desperations to leave your country that happened to our ancestors in Ireland and Germany and Italy are the same that modern immigrant Americans are facing today.
Worse, probably
They,
actually.
there are people forcing them out because they don't have food. They're forcing them out because they don't have a place to live. They are forcing them out because a drug cartel has taken over.
And that's like the mild shit, by the way.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
there are
like
people who would literally walk hundreds of miles through an uninhabited jungle for a chance to come to this country because their country is so bad.
that's crazy. That's what I imagine, man. And you know, I
Exactly.
like for example, I don't have any like disparaging comments of the people that live there and things like that, right? Unless you're like an asshole and you're fucking hurting people or something like that, right? But you know, like countries like that, I understand why it was called a shithole because I would not want to fucking even come near that place. Like,
Yeah.
it, terrible. They're fucking awful places to live. Now, granted, you know, like how developed it is or isn't, you know, I'm not the most educated person on that. I've seen images of some of the more rural areas, and I'm sure there are some places like, of course, in Africa and things like that, that are a lot more like developed. Like they have actual cities and things like that, like actual services, stuff like that. But there are still a lot of fucking rural villages that like don't even have water. They don't have a place to fucking live. They don't have things to eat. You know, in South America, it's worse. It's worse somehow. You know, because they have like they literally live under the threat of death or like forced labor or like you know they have kids being stolen to be put thrown into a fucking psycho army and pumped full of drugs and shit like that. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
they live
at
in
the
a
end of the
really
day,
yeah
America is trying, has always, I mean, that's our whole pull, right? Like
yep.
the land of the free and the land of opportunity that has been
God,
sold
what is the
to
quote from the
every,
what is the quote from the statue? Well, I think it's written on the base of Statue of Liberty. I want to say,
yeah,
"Bring me your sick, bring me your tired, bring me your
yeah.
weary." I believe it's something like
But
that.
like that's the
You know,
whole
like
point of the promise of America. And it
yeah,
wasn't just American patriotism. This ideal has been sent out and reverberated in the world for years, and people are actually hearkening to that. And to shut your
yeah.
doors on the promise that you have tried to make
Over the
to the
past couple hundred
world,
years, like suddenly it's like, you know what?
it's
Forget
it's
about it. Like
sad.
the
It's
fuck?
sad.
The fuck?
So I'm not saying everybody should be here. Like
Yeah.
in a perfect world, we would have the carrying capacity to take everybody,
Yeah.
right? But like,
Have you seen the video with the gumballs?
mm-mm,
You haven't? Hold on.
I don't think so. I'm sure you'll send
Uh
it to me. But the point being, like, should everybody be here? No, it's not feasible. It's not realistic. But in a practical sense, we should have a border policy
yeah.
where you set up the ability for people that are willing and capable and able to work and produce and better America to come over.
Yeah. So let me figure out a way to get this viewed real quick. Let me pop this out actually. Uh here we go.
All right.
So
You
let me
figure that out. Go to commercial break. I'm gonna go pee.
okay. Damn, that the 40 minutes is about 1.4 gigabytes an hour or so. It looks like.
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
which isn't that bad really, all things considered. So let me know when you're ready, and
Yep.
I
Go ahead.
will play.
Yep.
All right, cool.
Some people say that mass immigration into the United States
You hear it?
can help reduce world poverty. Is that true? Well, no, it's not. And let me show you why. This gumball represents the 1 million legal immigrants that the United States has taken every year on average since 1990. Now, who in the world deserves our humanitarian compassion? The World Bank has one measure of the desperately poor of the world. They make less than $2 a day. And how many people make less than $2 a day in the world? Well, let's start with Africa. In Africa alone, there are 650 million people who make less than $2 a day. 650 million. And in India, another 890 million people desperately poor. China adds another 480 million people, making less than $2 a day. And unfortunately, the rest of Asia has a heartbreaking 810 million people who the World Bank says make less than $2 a day. And finally, there's 105 million of Latin America's population that are desperately poor. All told, the World Bank says there are 3 billion people in the world, 3 billion people who are desperately poor, making less than $2 a day. That's 3,000 gumballs. And every year, we take 1 million and suggest that we've somehow made a humanitarian difference. Of course, we don't pull our immigrants from these desperately poor populations, do we? These people are too poor, too sick, too disconnected to make it here as immigrants. We tend to pull our immigrants out of the better off poor of the world. And Mexico tends to define the type of immigrant that we bring here because the plurality of people come from Mexico. And Mexico is poor. How many people in the world live in countries that have average incomes lower than that of Mexico? And the World Bank tells us that that number is these 3 billion plus another 2.6 billion people. 5.6 billion people in the world who live in countries with average incomes below that of Mexico. That's 5,600 gumballs. And so what is it that the elites are telling us? They're telling us that when we take this 1 million immigrants, that we somehow or another are tackling world poverty. And we have to do it regardless of the effect on our unemployed, the working poor, the most vulnerable members of our society, regardless of the effect on our natural resources. Even if we went by the most radical proposals in Washington, which are to actually double our immigration to 2 million a year, which would totally overwhelm our physical, natural, and social infrastructures, we couldn't make a noticeable difference. And we may be really hurting the impoverished people of the world because the 1 million that we do take are among the most energetic, often the better educated, certainly the most dissatisfied people that if they did not immigrate would be the agents for change to improve the lot of all the people in these countries. The true heroes in the global humanitarian field are the people in these countries who have the wherewithal to immigrate to another country, but instead stay in their countries to apply their skills to help their fellow countrymen. Unfortunately, our immigration system tends to entice these very type of people to abandon their countrymen. The impossibility of making even a dent is actually worse than it looks here. Because last year, when we took 1 million immigrants, these countries added, births over deaths, 80 million more people into the impoverished populations. And this year, Congress is bringing in 1 million legal immigrants. And this year, according to the United Nations, these countries are expected to add another 80 million people. And next year, you can be quite sure that Congress, unless stopped by the American voters, will bring in another 1 million immigrants. And these countries, unfortunately, will be adding another 80 million people into these impoverished nations. We could take 5 million a year, but we'd never get ahead of what's happening in these countries. Not in this century. Don't you see? Immigration can never be an effective or significant way to deal with the suffering people of the world. They have to be helped where they live. 99.9% of them will never be able to immigrate to a rich country. There's no hope for that. They have to bloom where they're planted. The only place that 99.9% of these people can be helped is where they live. Let's help them there.
What do you think?
I mean that really puts it in perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, and to give credit where credit is due, it's not a bad point to make. I do think it comes from like I think it doesn't consider all the possibilities, and so I think that in that way it is a victim of like I forget the name of the fallacy, but like deliberately not presenting all the possibilities and showing the flaws of the one that are is a fallacy. I just forgot the name of it. I'll remember it later. And so I do think that he makes a good point. I just don't know if he considers all the angles. So here's where I am at with it, because this was originally parodied by conservatives and everything like that. I got shared like a wildfire. I mean, it's got how many fucking views? I mean, it's got like, let's see, this video alone has 278,000 views or 778,000 views. Now I've seen that video a few times, and I'm pretty sure it's been re-uploaded a few times as well. I'd say up to maybe a million, but it's been like showed to a lot of people when it has been viewed, and so it's been like referenced quite a bit in it, and I don't think it makes a wrong point. Like you do have to help, like for example, if we as a country, if we as a civilization, right, like if Europe and America and all of that, if we fucked them over, I'm not necessarily saying we did. I'd have to look into it, right? But if we did fuck them over, by taking all the people who have been incentivized, like brain drain, right? Like people who are talented, are capable, are intelligent, are capable of incentivizing and instigating change, and we take them out of that situation, are we doing them any favors? I don't think so. And
Sure.
I don't blame them for wanting to come here, by the way. I really don't. I understand it completely. I do think, though, that if we are going to get resources, we need to figure out a way that we can apply it to them so that way they could improve their own country and their own place. And I think one of the ways we can do that is not necessarily by saying, "Hey, come here." I think it is saying, "Hey, come here and get educated. We'll pay for it." And then go back home and make your place better. And I think that is better for the world than
Mhm.
just saying come here and live here, because obviously it's caused a lot of instigation, right? And I don't think it's wrong necessarily to come here, like I said, but I do think that it is causing a lot of issues with our political system, with our people who are just so fucking angry at people living here and talking another language and things like that, and whether or not they immigrate, whether or not they not immigrate, whether or not they to what is it, assimilate is another topic entirely. But I do think it has value to at least consider, like incentivizing, which I think we do already. I'm not sure. Other people to come here and take advantage of our resources, take advantage of like our financial system, our education system, and then say, hey, you'll still have even if you want to do it by loans or whatever, like you still have these loans you have to pay, but we're putting an investment not just in our country but in your country and for the world, because honestly imagine we do this and like 10 years later, like pick a fucking country, imagine it's now full of people who are educated citizens, right? And we do that country by country, and it's not as easy as that, but imagine we live in a world where we could educate a country and the leaders and instigate real systematic change to improve the lot of life of those who live there. And they don't feel the need to come here because their country is livable. Their country is a place where they are safe, where they have food, they have water, they have clean water, they have places to live, they have jobs to do, they have things to do. And I feel like that is the world we should try to live in as best as we can. And I think it's something we should really work towards. And whether that is because I know we have a lot of foreign exchange students and things like that, and I feel like we should, for our education system, we should have it set up so that way more people from other countries can come here and not necessarily live here, not necessarily immigrate here, but go back to their countries and more informed, and not just from places like fucking the UK, not just places like Europe, places that like are from impoverished areas. We take them from there, we bring them here for a few years, let them educate, let them understand, hey, these are practical skills you have. Teach them to be electrician, teach them to be blue collar skills, whatever, and let them go back and improve the infrastructure and the resources of their of their home. And after a couple generations, I feel like we might actually solve real systematic problems. And that's where I'm at with it. Like,
It
yeah,
it's such a utopian idea that I
yeah,
absolutely agree with. But you look at a real present day issue of tangibility and cost to that. Like, of course, I want to take a Sudani from their village and educate them in the ways of architectural engineering so that they can help their people. But how do you justify to take a person who has nothing? In a literal sense, they have nothing and nothing to offer other than the availability to learn. How do you justify to take them, move them here, educate them, and ship them back after 5 years?
I think a
And
way you could do that. Yeah.
and truly, from a in a perfect world situation, that shouldn't even be a thought. But how, in a real sense,
Mhm.
where we have a fiscal budget, and we have to do that not for one person, but for a million people or 100,000 people, how do you make that happen from around the world where you can get people to come here, be educated, and then because remember when they're educating here, they're not providing anything for the country. Like they might have a part-time job or what, but they're not going to better the country. They're taking our education and they're taking it elsewhere. And I don't want that to sound like a
Yeah.
slight
So
against
yeah,
foreign people, but
absolutely.
you're not in a real sense you're not adding to any
Yeah.
economic workforce of the country. You're taking the education availability, and whether or not they pay for it is a different thing.
Yeah.
But you're not necessarily adding anything to the GDP of the country, and then you're going back to your country with the specialized knowledge that you have learned here. And
Yeah.
in a worldview sense, that's perfect. But in a modern, true, realistic sense, how does that work?
I can tell you. So, do you know how much it costs to put someone through to get an architectural degree?
Well, I can tell you that my public education costs me $45,000 a year at a public university.
So, I just Googled, and tuition fees for undergraduate architectural programs average $19,000 annually. And so,
Which is a
basically,
4 year program.
so it's a 4 year program.
So you're
So,
looking at almost $80,000 for that program.
so it costs to educate 1 million citizens a year, costs about $19 million a year.
Wait,
You have,
back up.
yeah,
The
to
math of that alone does not make sense.
yeah, no, 19,000 times 1 million, 19 million.
19,000, but $19,000 a year,
Yeah.
but you have to go 4 years. So
Yeah,
that's
but you still
80
pay it by
that's
year. You still pay it by year.
okay. So we'll pay it by year. We'll call it
Yeah.
$19 million.
Yeah, so $19 million a year, right? And even at 4 times the amount, which is 80 million, even if you do 80 million per year, you pay for the whole thing, 80 million per year.
Okay.
Do you know how much that is relative to how much we spend? It's nothing.
I agree.
And
But at
so
the end of
here's
the
how.
day,
Hold on. Here's how I think we could
where
do
does
it.
that money come from?
Here's how we could do it. Let's say cost of foreign aid, because we already do this. We already budget for it.
We do.
Uh, per year, right? Cost of foreign aid per year is about 70.4 billion. Now, I don't know how much of that is to the Ukraine. Um, let's assume worse like 30% is to the Ukraine, right? So, um, 70 or shit, wrong thing. Uh, you know, so worst case scenario, 30% of it goes to Ukraine or whatever. 49.28 billion. That is a lot of money. That is the amount of money we would spend to educate 1 million people per year is a drop in the bucket.
Well, so
like Guatemala.
I don't want to discount this fact, right? But there's a
Uh,
lot of factors that I would like to bring up.
yeah.
A, you're literally only looking at tuition cost. You're not looking at
True.
housing. You're not looking at anything else, moving them here, getting them here. You're assuming that those people can can speak English and retain the information that they're learning in those programs.
With a
You're assuming
translator,
that
sure.
you learn that it's someone that is capable of absorbing that information and is ready to do so within 4 years and then go back.
Here's a question though.
Even
Yeah.
let
Okay,
me
go
let me
ahead. Go
get
ahead.
through all of it. You're assuming that this person transplants here for 4 years. Obviously, there's a living cost which we haven't calculated. I don't think it's that much more significant than tuition.
Yep.
We get through that, right? At the end of that, when they go back, do you then assume that that education can have a direct effect on their current lifestyle? Because
Absolutely.
if you're well educated in, we'll say, civic engineering, and you live in a mud dump in South Sudan, are you actually going to be able to make changes with your education based on the place that you go back to?
I think yes, actually.
So I would very much agree that I would like to believe that. But if you're an educated person going back to a dirt village in Africa or a jungle village in South America, it doesn't matter how well educated you are. If you can't get concrete or the government to support you because it's corrupt or a local workforce because they've all scattered because of a cartel, it doesn't matter what your education is. And I'm
Yeah.
very much playing devil advocate, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what your education is if the place that they send you back to doesn't have a system willing to support the educated people.
So here's my idea, right? So I'm doing a slight small amount of math.
Okay.
So, do you know how many people are in the top 3 countries from South America that we import?
You mean like
Then the
like
total
per
countries,
year?
how many people actually live in the countries?
I don't
Guatemala,
understand the
Honduras, and
question.
El Salvador, according to Google. Could be
Oh,
wrong.
so like Mesoamerica. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's the idea I have, right? Is those 3 countries alone are 34 million people.
Hmm.
Do you have any idea how much impact we would make if we put back 1 million of those fucking people into education? The
Sure.
amount of people that would be educated?
That would be what?
1 out of
Y-
34. You know,
Yeah, about a
two. That's 2%.
yeah. I was gonna say two
Two
to three
percent.
percent of their population.
Almost 3% actually. And run it up, definitely 3%. So 3% of people, right?
Sure.
And here's the thing: it doesn't all have to be architectural degrees. A lot of it could be blue
Yeah,
collar work.
it's
Anything,
whatever it is that they need,
yeah, anything
right?
blue collar, right? And so if you put that many people, you're gonna have enough people to make a fucking substantial difference, and it costs a fraction of what we spend
In humanitarian
in
aid.
humanitarian aid alone,
Yeah.
that we already spend. And so think of it like this, right? All the costs that we could do. So, like, imagine if we actually dived into it. Remember how, like, we have areas in the country that are just completely fucking empty? Guess what? You know, you want to talk about doing good for the world? Put a fucking school in the middle there. Put a bunch of fucking dorm rooms. What would that do for the local economy? What would that do
Sure.
for our
Uh,
economy? You know,
here's here's I'll take this over and go to the right leaning
okay.
point what you're making. Why don't we do that with people that are already here? Why don't we take the impoverished people in Chicago and Detroit and LA and Seattle and put them through the same education to uplift them
I don't have
first?
a problem with that whatsoever, actually. And
So
so I would even go a step further. Because you know what? I think I might have a plan that even Republicans could agree with. They want illegal immigrants kicked out, right? I think that's very fair to say. The average Republican doesn't like illegal immigrants being allowed in and staying.
okay,
And a lot of them have like ideas on like what they do or don't do while they're here, but that's a whole other fucking argument. But let's say that like the average Republican can agree that say, hey, I want illegal immigrants gone. Well, then I ask, what are you willing to do it? So here's my proposal. So what if you say at announcement, okay, so here's what we're gonna do. If you want to sign up for this program, we will give you a place to live. We will give you an income. Like we will pay for your expenses for 4 years while you take this degree. and then you have to go back.
I mean,
Guess what? They're already here. And I bet you a bottom dollar if we had like specialized like we had things that were designed to teach even in their native language, for example, or even translators, like,
sure.
you know,
Let's take the logistics out of it.
yeah,
Yes.
the thing is even the logistics, the cost of it can't even approach how much we just give them in cash and assets and things like that. Like we give them a ton of cash, and here's the problem: based on my information I know of, which may not be accurate, depends. It's old. But my understanding is that a lot of the aid that we give away is siphoned. I think that's fair to say,
On
right?
here's the thing about American aid. So you look at Haiti, which is a major American aid after multiple disasters.
Yeah, yeah, they've been
Haiti has
fucked over.
Haiti has become so dependent on foreign aid that it's actually more efficient for them to wait for aid food crates than they plant their own crops. Because it's just
Really?
better for them to wait for the aid to come in and live off of them. So to your point, and truly, like, I can't really debate why it would be a bad idea if we want to just educate and ship out people. Like,
Everyone wins.
okay,
Guess what?
so
Democrats get like, for example, aid for immigrants that they can actually use and live with. Republicans get them the fuck out of the country, and they get to go home while being able to improve it. And it's something they have the option of doing. Now,
so
now here's what I think. I would go a step further and say, if you're going to deport somebody, you're going to say, okay, you don't qualify for asylum, you weren't supposed to be here. Let's say for some reason, like the Republican idea of like they're all just sneaking in and shit, like they get caught, they get deported, they get caught, they run away, they come back, right? So if you did something, say, okay, I'm not going to deport you. Instead, I give you an option. You can be deported, or you can take a class. You can live in this place. You can be comfortable for 4 years and take a degree of these degrees that are all practical blue collar things that either the country needs or that your country needs. And so we are desperate as a country, desperate for blue collar workers. It's not even funny. It's how desperate we are for them. And it's going to be real bad in like 30 years. It's going to be real bad. And so this is a solution to that. So if depending on how the cards play out and things like that, you could have it where they get to go back, we'll pay for them to go back, or they can stay for X amount of time and then go back or whatever. Some kind of compromise where everyone's happy and now it gets passed. So you can make it so they could literally live off of like for several years, and then either we as a country get something back because we get to tax them their income, right? So we get the money back in a way because we get to tax their improved income. They're here legally, they don't have any of the bullshit where being illegal makes it more difficult to report crimes and things like that. So they get to literally live and not have to look over the fucking shoulder for a few years. I think most immigrants would jump at that opportunity. I think, and so, and I think what might be really cool actually is if we could find like some English speaking like immigrants like either illegal or not and get what their opinion on it, like because that's a perspective I think would be very valuable because I've talked to a few here and there, but it was back in my Republican days and it wasn't the most nice conversation, so I was kind of a dick. I'm gonna own it. And I think it could be a valuable perspective, but
it's interesting that, like, to try to take this perspective of like people who really want to be here because their previous life situation was so bad. Like,
mhm.
you got to remember, like, there are people. I would postulate to say most people won't leave a situation unless they have to. And most of the
Yeah,
people that trying to cross the border are doing so out of desperation. So to get anything for them, and again, I literally cannot postulate what they would want. But to get anything for them would be ideal. But the thought of going back, even if they were educated, is not ideal for them. Like, they
yeah,
left
I
their country
understand.
for a reason.
But I mean, the reality is that like here is the fact of the matter is we cannot solve poverty in our country by taking them here.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
But
you know.
just shipping them back educated does not solve their problem either. It
I
will help.
if enough people do it, I think it could with enough time. The
Here's the
only
thing.
difficulty,
It doesn't matter how educated you are if the resources or support systems are not there to help develop your specialty. It doesn't matter how educated you are.
like for example, about the world's policeman, right? We'll get into this more in another episode. But let's say like if we're gonna be fucking a world's policeman, let's fucking lean into it. You know what? Like make a deal with the government of that country to say, you know what? We will send you your own citizens educated, and we will have boots on the ground in your country to protect them while they build infrastructure, they build bridges.
That would be ideal. You have to get an understanding of that. We are going to supervise the betterment. Okay, so this gets to our, I'm assuming, our final point for the
Yeah.
episode. Look at the world population. We're at what, 9 billion people, something
Mhm.
like that. If you look at the developed world of people that are scientists and engineers and people that progress the science and the development of humanity.
Yeah.
And the best example I can give is when we discovered and perpetuated the internet. You had a
Mhm.
bunch of people working in small groups that had similar ideas that really took a long time to share. Then the internet came along and everyone could share all these ideas and it supercharged how fast we could spread information, right?
Yep. I think it's largely the responsibility why
So
we have such technology boom. But go ahead.
it is, yes, correct. But imagine if, so like your video, you saw so many gumballs of people living below the poverty, like $2 a day or less than Mexico, which we consider a very impoverished people. Imagine if you could take them and instead of worrying about their survival of how they're going to feed their family, they have the security to know that they're okay and can use their human brain power to advance science and medicine.
Exactly. That's the end goal, right? That is always the end goal.
Do
And
you know
so,
how many people in Asia
mhm.
alone, if we secured their basic needs, could contribute to the scientific community? It would be triple of what triple is even an understatement. I mean, like you look at the Western world, America has 340 million people. Most of them are not of the high-end, advanced, technologically advancing people. We'll say maybe at a very liberal estimate is 10%. So we say we have 30 million people here in this country advancing technology and medicine
Yeah.
and all the things that it means to be human. Do you know what that compares to India,
What?
who has like 3 billion people in it? 10% of that, 10% that could advance science is the entire population of America.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy? I just did some math. So there are 1.28 billion people in China at the moment, according to Google says. How accurate it is? I don't know. It's Google. Let's see. And
Sure.
so, do you know what the percentage of people who quantify as geniuses, aka above 140 IQ?
I would assume it was less than 1%.
Oh yeah, 0.27% actually.
Yeah.
Um,
So we're
yeah.
taking
So
a hard number to round 0.3%
yeah,
are intellectually geniuses.
exactly. And how much could a genius do if they were given an opportunity?
But look at that 0.3% of genius compared to 1.2 billion people.
Exactly. So that is 348,800,000
That is more than the
geniuses.
U.S. population.
Geniuses in Asia, and
And
in
here's the
China
thing.
actually, just in China. So imagine.
And that's the funny thing, right? Like you don't need to be a genius to be a pioneer in a industry.
And that's, by the way, that's in the literal genius above 140. Like even
What
above
I'm
average,
saying
like
is
120. Like even
I'm taking a conservative estimate that 10% is pushing your technology forward. Look at 10% of just China's population.
I think it's fair. 10% of
You
China's population. I mean,
10% of China's population is what, like
128 million.
128 million people.
Mhm.
Those people could be specialist scientists. So, as I follow a lot of psychology journal
Yeah.
and science journals. Do you know the number one publisher of the number one country of publishing papers in psychology?
Number one country? I imagine it's like probably Britain,
It is China.
China.
And they
Really?
have only recently done so in the last few years because they have had a boom of high level, technically literate studies. And for a long time before China, it was places like Germany, Italy, America, Britain.
Yeah.
But just based on the sheer volume of people that are educated, you have to look at over half of the world's population is in Asia,
Which is
between India
crazy.
and China. If those people were uplifted to a point where they had their basic needs taken care of, the benefit to human society would be overwhelmingly positive.
I agree. I just had a thought. So, do you know how cooperative countries like Guatemala are to the U.S.? I don't know. Do you know?
I mean, I would assume that they would have a diplomatic liking based on their resources.
So, okay. So apparently Guatemala are actually close diplomatic relations. Let's see, Honduras. Joint military units, and what is it, El Salvador?
Hmm.
Yeah, dude, they're all partners. There's no reason why
Yeah,
we couldn't do this shit. So if you literally like say, hey, we're gonna earmark a certain amount of money. Here's what we're gonna do. We are gonna send, instead of the military that we had in fucking bumfuck nowhere, and I apologize for the verbiage, but like in the middle of the fucking Middle East, where they're not wanted. They're literally not wanted. Like they get fucking rocks and shit thrown at them. Like we literally propped up a fucking government for years until we decided to say fuck it, just not do it anymore. Like the cost and the frozen life and everything was just not feasible. They need to match. They need a culture change. We'll talk about that later. But those three countries are like the number one immigration sources from South America, and they're all cooperating with the U.S.
mm,
So to me, this means that they should be okay if we go to them and say, okay, here's what the plan is. We want to educate 1 million of your people over the course of next 20 years, right? So what
not
we need,
even 4 years,
over the no,
five
say
years.
or however many years, right? So probably like realistically, at a country that small, it would be a massive undertaking to move that many people and their resources and stuff. But
I
like,
bet you we could do it in less than 10 years.
okay, so say 10 years, right? Let's say
Sure.
we want to educate 1 million of your populace in 10 years. Here's what we need. We need you to give us permission to get boots on the ground. We'll come up with agreements that we have, that if you have a military, we'll operate jointly. And what we will do is we will secure, after we educate them, we will secure your citizens. We will escort them to and from the places they need to go to build infrastructure for your country, to the point where they feel safe, to the point where they feel fed. They don't have to work. Well, we will literally spin the military. Either people literally in the military have expertise that qualify. They do this a lot, by the way. That's what they did with the wall. That's how they got it built, at least most of it anyway. And we will also we will provide the aid, humanitarian aid they need to make sure it goes to the right place, so it actually feeds and waters these people while they work, and they will have a stipend from us until the infrastructure is built. So this way, they have actual, real improvement infrastructure. I'm talking like houses, apartment buildings, like whatever things they need, like roads, like real things people need to actually form communities and be safe.
Mm.
Like get them the things they need, and this way they don't feel like they're like, because I imagine the problem they have in places like that are like cartels. I think that's fair to say, right? Like
So
cartels in
that
places
was
like
that was going to be
Salvador.
my point was that how do you get around the people that are actually in power versus the government that is there?
Here's what we do: we cooperate with the government. If the cartels show up, we blow them the fuck up. They cannot compare. They do not have the resources. They
So
do not have the shit.
okay,
Whether or not that would work, I don't know. But
that's another episode. But in your idealized world,
in
continue.
my idealized world, what we would do is we would escort them to make sure the infrastructure is built. And again, one of the biggest things that they get, I guess, what do you want to do for the last topic? Like, it's probably a good idea for the last topic, but because we have about 30 minutes left. So, if the cartels, I would say their biggest income source is probably drugs, right? It's fair
Yeah.
to say. Probably drugs,
I'm
maybe sex
assuming,
trafficking,
yeah.
but like mostly drugs. And so, because from my understanding is their power has notably spiked whenever we further enforce restrictions on drugs. Is that fair to say?
I don't know the details of that, but I guess
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, my understanding that's the case. I could be wrong, but devil's advocate and all that. So, in my opinion, if you make it so those individuals like no longer have the power that they do, they don't have the money, they don't have the power
Sure.
they do. And so it's the same issue with Mexico. Like, I'd actually be down for this situation with Mexico if the Mexican government wanted to cooperate. I don't know how corrupt it is or isn't, so I don't know how likely that is. But if you wanted to do it where say, hey, instead of your people coming here and trying to live here and things like that, because they don't have the things they need to survive, like they have a legitimate asylum concern because they
Mm.
don't have like food, they don't have water, their village doesn't have anything related to modern safeties. They don't have the basic necessities to live. Form the partnership and educate the people to build resources in their community. I figure that is
Yeah.
much more impact than long term. But I think the single thing we could do for policy things is try to at least decriminalize, if not legalize, but at least decriminalize drugs. And if it is legalized, you could regulate it, you could tax it. Apparently, most drugs, even like meth, apparently, which is fucking crazy to me, even meth is medicinal in some cases. The fuck? I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently that's true.
I feel like we need an entire episode on decriminalizing drugs.
Yeah.
But yes,
Yeah.
continue.
If you decriminalize it, they no longer have the money and the
Yeah,
power
sure.
and
So
things like
like,
that. Yeah.
we can confirm that like with the legalization of marijuana in several states in this country, that the tax benefits are just skyrocketing.
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
you look at Colorado, you look at California, you look at Washington. They're just Colorado was considering giving some of the money back because they had so much in tax surplus. It was insane. But it's taking the morality out of these drugs, like just being able to regulate them. So Ohio is a massive battleground for heroin and fentanyl overdose. That is a
What is?
huge problem. Fentanyl.
Yeah, fentanyl overdose. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Because
Ohio is
yeah.
huge for that.
Oh shit, that sucks.
We are one of the top states for fentanyl and heroin overdoses. But taking the ability to profit from that out of, if you don't have a reason,
Do they even smuggle weed anymore? Is there any point? Do they even do it?
for marijuana, probably not.
Yeah, I mean,
You're
dude,
looking at mostly like hard narcotics between opioids and
heroin, meth, things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's those are opioids, but like major
Cocaine
narcotics.
is a big one.
Yeah, so like marijuana is not even on most. I have a friend who went on a trip to. She flew on a plane to Vermont and had a weed gummy and a vape in her pocket. TSA didn't even think about it. Didn't even try to stop her. They don't
Wow.
care. They don't care. They
That
care
used,
about.
that used to be a jail sentence, by the way.
They only care about threats to security.
Yep. Now, we're not saying go and fucking fly with that shit, by the way.
No.
Your mileage will vary, but it is a remarkable improvement. And by the way, do you want to know the fucking tax rate for in Virginia, which I visit sometimes? for fucking weed.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge.
21%.
It's like 20%. Yeah.
21%.
Yeah. It's
How
up there
much
for.
money are they making from weed?
It's up. So Ohio recently legalized full recreational cannabis, and we are just now handing out recreational licensing. Dude, it is. I'm not a weed guy. That's not my thing. My wife is into that. She is paying like $10 per. I think she was paying $20 per
Yeah.
gram, and
So,
that's not that's like decent regulated weed.
yeah.
I'm like,
Wait,
Jesus
$20 per
Christ.
gram? Where?
Yes. At recreational dispensaries.
Yeah. Holy shit.
And
That's
that's
crazy.
you're I mean a huge part of that is taxation.
Yeah. Like for example, we found a website that we can buy diamonds from, which are high potency, very high potency, something like
Hmm.
40% THC. And it is $7.50 per gram.
I
And it's
believe that.
mailed to you.
I believe that.
And by the way, did you know the total marijuana tax revenue for Virginia alone by 2030 is estimated to be per year over $100 million.
Yeah, no, I absolutely believe that. If you look at the tax income from original recreational states like California and Colorado, they are making fucking bank. And the problem isn't from the money coming in, it's making sure that that money gets
That
spent.
number's not real.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Dude, you know how much they made in 2021?
Who?
423 million.
Who?
Colorado in
I
tax
believe
revenue.
that. I believe that
423 million.
100%.
It is
I believe
since
that 1,000%.
total to date is over $2 billion.
Yes.
By the way,
Here's the thing. It matters not that they're making the money, that the money is going to places that
it should.
matter.
And by the way, I here is the only tax I think I would agree from the federal government. Well, I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe that's a
I
strong
feel like
statement.
we're gonna get another episode
Yeah,
about taxes,
yeah.
but yes,
But
go ahead.
so here's one thing I would blanket accept. If there was a law that added a 5% sales tax to all cannabinoid products, with the requirement it cannot be spent on anything else, that it's spent on education in the country.
Actually, a lot of tax
I know a lot of it's already
from
dedicated to it, but
cannabinoids
like,
is going
yeah,
towards education.
yeah. But is it
That's a lot
mandated
of it.
by law?
Yeah, that they set it up in their fiscal budget based on tax revenue. That is what it goes to.
I think that is very good for the world, man.
I mean, it baffles. So here's the funny thing about weed, right?
Yeah.
If you want to open a dispensary in a state that has just legalized recreational marijuana, you have to fund it yourself because federally marijuana is still illegal.
Hmm.
So any FDIC bank that is worth its salt is not going to grant you a loan to open your own dispensary. Because in the federal government's eyes and in the bank's eyes, you are still peddling illegal drugs.
How much would you need to open a dispensary, though?
I mean I would guess probably upwards of $100,000 plus. Because you have to get
Yeah.
at least in
Not to mention initial
Ohio,
inventory.
at least in Ohio, our licenses are handed out like liquor licenses. You're only allowed a certain number per county. And so
So
they distribute them based on availability. So like if there's 50 people looking to open a vape weed shop, they only have the allowance for 35 licenses. They bid to see who gets those 35 licenses and they open them at locations in that county. So
so
you can't just have any.
yeah.
You just can't just walk in and just buy one. They're regulated. And at the end of that, you still have to pay all of your regular business taxes, plus you have to pay a state recreational tax based on the fact that it's marijuana.
So, proposal. Do you want to we want to be next episode talking about weed?
We can talk about weed next episode.
So, here's a question. Well, not really a question, more of a statement. Do you know the cost of opening a dispensary? It looks to be, according to Google, between 250,000 and 2 million.
That's a big range.
Yeah, it is. You want to know how much they make per year on average, the owner, and just profit
Sure.
to themselves?
What?
250 and 500,000 per year.
Sure, I believe that.
That is a ridiculous amount of money to make.
We're at a weird, and I'm sure we will.
It's
discuss
incredibly
this
profitable.
later.
It's not going to be as profit. It's not going to be profitable like this forever, though. It's
No,
going to be
it's
less
not.
profitable over time.
And we'll discuss this in another episode. But like, it's very interesting to kind of see the. It's the same kind of thing where when prohibition for alcohol in the 20s happened, and then the pop-ups of what happened after that. It's all business based on what the government allows.
Yeah.
So, all right. So let's end this one. Any final comments on how Trump is like Hitler and how we got on? I feel like this episode was very border immigration. I think
Yeah.
we made good points.
Yeah.
I think it was good,
And
man.
it proposed a few good solutions, like for example, if it got to the point where like if there was a politician, no matter who they said they were, if they said, our plan is not to bring in 1 million immigrants per year, it is to educate immigrants in their own country with support from the U.S. to make their country better, I would vote for them every fucking time.
Sure. I would love to see, and I think that's a lot of problem of how narrow-minded a lot of American politics is
Yeah.
that they don't realize how narrow their view is compared to what the world needs.
Exactly. And okay, don't get me wrong. Would I prefer if like we could just bring them here and then just like educate them and put them back? Sure. Is it more practical and probably politically feasible to deport them back after educating them? Probably. And
Well, I mean, take it as you will, that you're still bettering
you're
the
still bettering
world
them.
and what you're doing.
And I think the important thing is we're going to have such a big military. If you're going to have such an expensive military, it needs to be fucking worth it. And I'm sorry,
Sure.
but droning random ass fucking hills in the desert is not worth it to me.
Sure.
How much we spend on it?
We can definitely do another episode on military and black book spending.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it's fucking
Yeah.
crazy. So, we're coming up at just under 2 hours. I think this is about it. Any other comments?
No, I like what we're doing. I hope we do it again.
Yeah, man, absolutely. And for those who stayed this long, I want to thank you so much for listening. This is the very first episode. I know it's a little sketchy, but we'll get better over time.
We'll refine it.
Yeah, we will refine it. And thank you so much. And I want you to have an awesome and wonderful day. And thank you for watching. Bye bye.
Absolutely.
Oh, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah.